Charles, a wealthy businessman known for his charisma and success, was on another business trip to China. At the Onitsha main market, he was a trusted figure who dealt in high-quality female wares imported from China. His wealth afforded him a comfortable life, yet he remained a man of discipline and focus, always seeking to expand his empire. At the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, waiting for his flight, he noticed Anita, a stunning young woman with a confident stride and an infectious smile. Anita, a trader in baby wares, was on her way to Turkey to restock her shop in the same bustling Onitsha market. Despite the crowd, their paths crossed when they ended up seated next to each other while waiting to board their respective flights. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" Charles asked, his deep voice carrying a respectful tone. "No, you can have it," Anita replied, her smile lighting up her face. As they began talking, Charles was struck by Anita's intelligence, humility, and ambition. She shared her experiences running her shop, her passion for business, and her dreams of expanding her brand. Charles found himself captivated, not only by her beauty but by her drive and self-assuredness. Their conversations flowed naturally, and by the time boarding was announced, Charles felt a connection he hadn't experienced in years. Before parting, they exchanged phone numbers, promising to stay in touch. Throughout their business trips, they kept in contact through phone calls and messages. Charles was open about his feelings, often expressing how much he admired Anita. Though initially hesitant, Anita found herself drawn to his sincerity and warmth. By the time they returned to Nigeria, they had built a strong bond. Charles wasted no time. He invited Anita out for dinner, choosing one of the finest restaurants in Onitsha. As they laughed and shared stories over a meal, Charles reached for her hand and said, "Anita, you are everything I've ever wanted in a partner. Will you marry me?" Caught off guard but filled with joy, Anita nodded. The restaurant erupted in applause as other diners cheered them on. Their love story became the talk of the market, culminating in a grand wedding attended by family, friends, and business associates. Anita's new life as Mrs. Charles began with bliss. Their home was a spacious, beautifully furnished duplex in a serene neighborhood. Anita, though young at 22, quickly adapted to her new role, managing the household with grace and continuing to run her shop. Months into their marriage, Anita discovered she was pregnant. While the news brought immense joy, the pregnancy also brought challenges. Morning sickness and fatigue made it difficult for her to handle house chores. One evening, after struggling to prepare dinner, she sat beside Charles and said, "Honey, I need help. I think it's time we hire a maid." Charles, always attentive to Anita's needs, agreed immediately. The following day, he contacted a reputable agency and explained their requirements. The agency assured him they would send someone trustworthy. On a sunny Saturday morning, Cherry arrived. She was a 32-year-old woman with a polite demeanor and an air of decency. She introduced herself with a soft smile, but beneath her exterior lay a heart burdened by envy and frustration. Cherry had lived a difficult life, filled with failed relationships and unrealized dreams. Seeing the young, beautiful Anita living the life she had always wanted ignited a deep resentment in her. Cherry began her duties diligently, cooking, cleaning, and assisting Anita with household tasks. However, as the days passed, her jealousy grew. She couldn't help but compare her own struggles to Anita's seemingly perfect life. Cherry's envy turned to bitterness as she observed the love between Charles and Anita. She became obsessed with the idea of disrupting their happiness. One evening, she overheard Charles telling Anita, "You're the best thing that ever happened to me." Those words stung Cherry, fueling her resolve to act. Determined, Cherry visited a native doctor in her village, a place she hadn't been to in years. The native doctor listened as Cherry poured out her frustrations. He handed her a small packet of powdered charm, instructing her to mix it into Anita's food. "This will teach her humility," he said. Cherry hesitated but ultimately followed through. That evening, she prepared Anita's favorite soup and carefully added the charm. Anita, unaware, ate the meal with gratitude. "Thank you, Cherry. This is delicious," she said, smiling. The next morning, Anita woke up screaming. "Charles! I can't see," she cried. Panic engulfed the household as Charles rushed her to the hospital. Doctors conducted numerous tests but found nothing wrong. They suggested it might be a rare, unexplained condition. Weeks turned into months, and Anita's blindness remained. Despite the challenges, Charles stood by her side, assuring her of his love. "You're still my queen," he said, holding her close. When Anita gave birth to a baby boy, the household celebrated. However, Anita's inability to see her son's face filled her with sorrow. Trusting Cherry completely, she often relied on her to bathe and care for the baby. Cherry, feeling triumphant, began to see herself as indispensable. Charles, overwhelmed by the demands of work and home, often returned late, exhausted. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, he fell asleep on the parlor sofa. Cherry, sensing an opportunity, approached him quietly. She knelt beside him and gently touched his chest, waking him. Startled, Charles asked, "What are you doing?" Cherry, her voice low and seductive, replied, "Sir, I can't hide it anymore. I have feelings for you. From the first day I came here, I've been drawn to you." Charles tried to pull away, but Cherry persisted, her hands roaming over his body. Her words, coupled with his exhaustion and emotional vulnerability, clouded his judgment. Against his better instincts, he gave in to her advances. The act left Charles filled with guilt and shame. Cherry, however, felt victorious. She believed she had secured a place in Charles's heart and began acting more boldly around the house. In the days that followed, Charles avoided Cherry, consumed by guilt. He considered sending her away but feared the repercussions of exposing his betrayal. Cherry, on the other hand, grew more confident, treating Anita with subtle disdain. Anita, though blind, began sensing tension in the house. "Charles, is everything all right? You've been so distant lately," she asked one evening. Charles, unable to face her, mumbled a vague response and quickly changed the subject. Cherry, emboldened by her perceived power, began envisioning a future where she replaced Anita. She fantasized about becoming the lady of the house, imagining herself at Charles's side. Cherry continued to secretly have an affair with Anita's husband, Charles. Anita, though blind, was deeply connected to God. She began to notice that her prayer life had weakened and concluded that something spiritual was affecting her. Her suspicions grew after recurring dreams where Cherry chased her with a knife. Determined to reclaim her spiritual strength, Anita resolved to pray and fast for 7 days. On the 6th day of her fast, while deep in prayer, Anita experienced a breakthrough. She felt a weight lift off her body, and her sight was miraculously restored. Overwhelmed with gratitude, she thanked God but decided to keep her newfound vision a secret, even from her husband. She quickly called for her son, Kamsi, who was playing in the living room. Seeing her son's face for the first time since his birth, Anita was moved to tears and whispered, "Kamsi, you look just like your father." Anita, still pretending to be blind, called Cherry and asked her to bring a glass of water. Cherry entered the room, shockingly wearing one of Anita's expensive outfits. Anita was taken aback but maintained her facade, silently questioning how long Cherry had been living this way in her home. To uncover more, Anita used her walking stick to move around the house, pretending to navigate as a blind person. In the living room, she discovered that her wedding photos had been taken down and replaced with Cherry's pictures. When she ventured into Cherry's room, she was appalled to find her clothes, jewelry, and bank cards in Cherry's wardrobe. As Anita stood in shock, Cherry walked in and asked, "Ma, is everything okay?" Anita, feigning blindness, replied, "Oh, is this your room? I thought it was mine. Please help me back to my room." Cherry helped Anita back to her room, unaware that Anita could now see everything. Anita decided to remain quiet until her husband returned. That evening, around 8 p.m., Charles came home and greeted Anita with his usual hug and kiss on the cheek. He informed her that he would eat dinner before joining her. As Charles sat at the dining table, Cherry entered wearing a revealing red gown. She touched his shoulder and flirtatiously asked if he was enjoying his meal. Charles, initially quiet, finally said, "Cherry, why are you doing this? You know I can't resist this temptation." Cherry responded slyly, "It's not a temptation, Charles. It's just another meal, enjoy it so you can enjoy me later." Unbeknownst to them, Anita was watching from a corner of the living room. Her heart sank as she witnessed their betrayal. Overcome with emotion, she stepped out of the shadows and shouted, "Cherry, so you came to destroy my home. I knew something was wrong the moment I saw you earlier in my clothes. How dare you? And now you're seducing my husband in my lingerie. Charles, how long has this been going on? Who replaced my wedding pictures with Cherry's? Cherry, you made me blind just to take my husband, but God exposed you." In her rage, Anita grabbed a pot of hot water she had been boiling and threw it at Cherry. Screaming in pain, Cherry ran to her room, quickly tied a wrapper around herself, and fled the house without taking any belongings. Charles, shaken and remorseful, knelt before Anita, pleading, "Babe, please forgive me. I didn't mean to hurt you. Cherry came here to destroy our marriage. Please find it in your heart to forgive me." Tears streamed down Anita's face as she hugged Charles and said, "I forgive you. It's not entirely your fault." Charles, relieved, hugged her tightly and asked joyfully, "Babe, so you can see now?" Anita smiled and replied, "Yes, honey. After my prayers yesterday, God restored my sight. I know Cherry used her fetish acts to blind me, but thank God her plans failed." Charles promised to rebuild their marriage, and together they thanked God for exposing Cherry and restoring their family.